The following takes place shortly after Khalil's most recent viewing of Monster House. He's walking along with Batman, trying to forget about his newly found phobia of houses. Slacktober Fest!
It was a house.
It was a monster house.
It was a house.
It was a monster house.
It was a house.
It was a monster house.
Monster House was directed by Gil Kenan and it was produced by the Robert Zemeckis and the Steven Spielberg. This might be a well-known Halloween film now, but it's in the underrated flicks category of reviews because I don't think anyone else really knows how much work was put into this movie, and I need to get this out there. The story of the film follows a very typical plot of a Halloween's kids movie. The protagonist's neighbor is a creepy old man that lives in a creepy old house. Upon investigation, the protagonist figures out that things aren't exactly as they seem. And here's the twist. So instead of a scary monster living inside of the house that the creepy old man lives in, the monster is the creepy old house. And this film isn't so much its story, even though it's a good story, but it's the execution of it. This is an animated film that is completely original. It is based on no pre-existing source material, which is extremely rare to find in animated movies these days. And one of the writers for the original script for this movie is Dan Harmon. Dan Harmon. Like Community and Rick and Morty Dan Harmon. This story is told in such a fun and adventurous way, and it really makes you feel like a kid again, in that adventurous Halloween movie type of way. And I'm not just saying that because member berries. Granted, this is a kid's movie, but it's not exactly for the smallest of children. There are a few moments that might be a little too spoopy for little kids, which, I mean, it's fine. It's fine, because it's not meant for little kids. But Dan Harmon had a problem with that. So apparently Dan Harmon's script was much more kid-friendly and fun and a lot less spooky. And when the movie came out, a friend of his, her daughter, was really scared by the movie. Scared so much that she cried. And so Dan Harmon wrote her a letter saying, hey, I understand this movie's dumb. He said Gil Kenan is a hack and Steven Spielberg is a moron. And he told her, whenever you see the movie on TV, just know that the writer thinks it's dumb. Now that doesn't mean this is a dumb movie, even though one of the writers is saying it's dumb, and I know that's weird to say, but understand that the writing process is much different than the filmmaking process. It's not exactly what the writer saw when he was writing it, so it's understandable that he doesn't like it, but it's still very well made. Even though Dan Harmon doesn't like it, and watching it now as more of an adult, and noticing that there are a lot of plot holes, this movie still holds up. Especially in the technical department. Robert Zemeckis, known from his smaller films, I don't know if you've heard of these, Forrest Gump and the Back to the Future trilogy. So he had his own animation studio back in the day. That's 8 years ago. Anyway, it was called ImageWorks. He was really big into motion capture animation movies, and this can be seen in Polar Express, Beowulf, and A Christmas Carol. The director of Monster House thought that motion capture animated movies looked a little awkward, like when it gets into that uncanny valley realm, the uncanny valley, when something that isn't human looks a little too close to being human, it just gets a little freaky, gets a little weird. The director of Monster House wanted this to have a much more stylized look to it, but while also being motion capture, while still getting those performances out of the actors. So what they did to animate this movie was they took little 3D models of artwork done in the concept art, and they scanned those 3D sculptures, and they implanted the little models onto the motion capture performances. So it's these moving characters that like are moving realistically, but they also have a claymation look to them. Even though this film doesn't look like it, all of the performances were done by real-life actors on a real-life set that looks more like a skeleton set. They got famous actors too. Let me get out the list. Let me get out the list of people that they got to make this movie. And remember, to get these motion capture performances, they had to put them in like crazy suits. They had to like glue like motion capture hats to their hair. Like they glued these things on with like 70 little balls all around in skin-tight suits. They got John Heder, Fred Willard, Catherine O'Hara, Steve Buscemi, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Jason Lee, Kevin James, and Nick Cannon. They also got Kathleen Turner. They got Oscar-nominated Kathleen Turner to play the house. I don't know how they did it without, like, offending her. And the look and feel of this type of animation might not be everyone's cup of tea, because I have heard people say that it looks a little weird to them. But ever since I was little and first saw this movie, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I just knew that I liked it a lot. Apparently it's because it kicks ass. And upon rewatching this movie as, like, an adult and the film connoisseur, I noticed that the cinematography in this movie was crazy awesome, like way better than any animated movie deserves to have. They even found a cool way to make this happen. So, in their editing software, the programmers added in, like, a virtual camera that you can put into the software. So like when they take all the footage and animate it, they made a little camera that can be anywhere. Like they can place it anywhere, since motion capture is just cameras all around taking 3D models of people. They were able to put like a little tiny virtual camera inside this program and put it anywhere they want, move it any way they want to. So the director of photography could actually be a cinematographer, and he could go in there, in this cartoon, and place the camera any way he wants. They don't have to animate around it. The DP can work around all this stuff that they have, which is amazing. This makes the movie feel like a really well-shot film and gives the DP millions of things to play with. I even also kind of have to talk about sound design in this movie. When I was looking at the bonus features, when they were doing sound design, they were like, man, to make this house like come alive, we have to like really find what wood getting like broken apart sounds like. And they're like, well, we could break some wood apart, or we can set up a bunch of microphones in a house right before it gets torn down. And that's what they did. To get the sound design of this house like breaking apart, they set up microphones all around this house as it was getting torn down. So like when you're like, man, this cartoon really sounds like a house doing house things, it's because it is. It is. They put a lot of work into this movie, and all of them deserve recognition. And since this is a review, I do have to talk about the downsides of the movie. And like rewatching it, it's still amazing, but it's funny because I like it in much different ways than I did when I was younger. I love it for the technical aspect of it. There was a lot of hard work put into this little animated movie that was based on nothing. Like, it's an original work that had tons of work put into it, and like big producers behind it. Dude, like Steven Spielberg, Robert Zemeckis, come on. So it's just a little disappointing when some of the plot elements don't hold up as well as they did. There's a lot of contradictions plot-wise. Like, I don't want to get into it too much, but there's a lot of little things where it's like, well, you told me this couldn't happen. You told me this could happen. Now this is happening. Now this isn't happening. I don't understand. And some of the dialogue doesn't really fly. Although, a lot of the humor still holds up, though. I will say, it got me to laugh quite a few times, and I was very surprised at how much I laughed out loud at this movie. Maybe even more so than I did when I was a kid, because when I was a kid, this movie was a little spooky, don't get me wrong. But all in all, this is a great Halloween movie, which is why we're doing it for Slacktober Fest. It's good for this type of weather. You know, it's nice. Get a cup of coffee, get a cup of hot cocoa, just cuddle up in a blanket, turn the lights off, and watch this cute little movie. It makes you feel like it's Halloween. And the chemistry between the characters, even though they're in, like, crazy outfits, it's still there. These kids still feel like best friend kids, and that's awesome. It's a fun adventure movie. It should be remembered, and it should be acknowledged for at least the work that was put into it. So I am going to give Monster House a 9 out of 10. Go check out this movie. Where is it? Where do I have it? I got it right here. Check out this movie. But you know where you can pick up your own copy of Monster House? If you live in the Quad City area. Disc Replay. I don't know why I held up the movie when saying Disc Replay, because this isn't... this... Disc Replay. There's 2 locations, one at North Park Mall and one on Avenue of the Cities. And you can just go in and buy used movies, Blu-rays, books, games, anything that's like a disc, like even Frisbees. You can get Frisbees there because it's Disc Replay. How cool is that? But anyway, awesome place, awesome people working there. It's just, it's a good place to buy stuff. If you're building up your own little movie shelf, it's a nice place to fill that up. They've helped me out in the past by showing you some of my stuff, so the least I can do is say thank you to Disc Replay and check them out. Anyway, thank you for watching. This was our very first video in Slacktober Fest. And I'm sorry this one's out a little bit later than I originally thought, but I promise you there still will be 4. Just my time was a little preoccupied with a certain Netflix show based on a certain superhero character. Wow, 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 wow. Wow. Wow, wow. Wow, 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 wow. Wow, wow. As always, thank you for watching, and stick right here for some more spook this month. We're gonna have another gaming video coming up. Check out our other gaming videos. We're gonna have 3 more horror movie reviews, so stay tuned, folks. Alright, this video is done. As always,
Watch movies, my friend.